When you Google teleportation sound effects, I'll tell you the pickings are slim. But hey, you do what you can do. All that's to say that we're yet again transporting us back in time to June of 2018 at the Recruiting Automation Summit, the last of this look back behind saga. For our final episode, we're chatting with the CEO of a fellow recruiting automation startup and learning about their efforts to build a diverse workforce as they begin to scale. Stay tuned.
Do you want to add value to your business, or do you want to just be this administrative person?
And often, if you look at your talent team and the caliber of talent in your company, they correlate.
You could hire the best person for the job if they were in your candidate pool.
All these individual employees, one by one, together, their voices all come together to articulate the culture of the company.
What we saw at DropBox was that diverse candidates would drop out of the interview process at much higher rates. So they would drop out both withdrawing, so deciding themselves like, okay, I'm not a good candidate, and also be rejected.
Hello, listeners. This is Sean Simmerly, your host for the afternoon, I suppose, for this episode of Intello's Hiring on All Cylinders. It's been quite a day. We're still going. We've spoken with a bunch of thought leaders, and, sometimes you need to take a step back and be like, okay, we've covered a lot. Let's keep going. Why stop now? So sitting across from me, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Kanjun Qiu. She is the CEO of Sourceress and has also had a bunch of experience in a number of different organizations. One, just this tiny little company that you might have heard of called DropBox. And excited to kind of hear about Kanjun's experience and all of her wealth of knowledge. Kanjun, welcome to the team.
Thank you.
Of course. So let's start at kind of a position before Sourceress and talk about kind of what got you, I guess, into deciding that you wanted to found your own company. So can you talk to me maybe about DropBox and what that was like, scaling it from, what did you mention? You said
200 to 1,200 people.
Yeah, that's
roughly.
no small feat. So tell me about DropBox. Tell me about what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, so I joined DropBox when it was about 200 people. It was in 2012. And I eventually kind of became the chief of staff. So my background is in engineering, and I love building stuff, but I was super curious about the business side. And eventually, as chief of staff, I kind of ran our executive meetings and staff meetings and worked on a lot of recruiting. A lot of what a company does as it scales from 200 to 1,200 people is hire people. And so who
would have thunk?
Yeah, I know, right? And so we'd hire hundreds of engineers every year, and that was a lot of what I thought about. And while at DropBox in that process, as I was, in the process of hiring all of these engineers, what I realized is, wow, this whole process is super manual and really hard. And why is it that it's 2014 at the time, and we don't have better ways to find people? And, as a team, we're like, we need that critical member of our team, that next critical member. Where are they? Who are they?
Yeah.
And it's so manual right now. And also on the other side, as a candidate, someone who's maybe not super excited where they are, why is it so hard for them to figure out where is the next place I want to go? And so that was the inspiration for Sourceress, where I wanted to make it easier for people on both sides to find each other, and also really I call it increasing serendipity. Increase serendipity on both sides, because that's how jobs are found today. People find it through serendipity, through a friend, through a cold reach out, through some other thing. And if we, as Sourceress, could work with companies to really find the right people, and then help them reach out to those people in a really personalized and targeted way, then we could increase serendipity on both sides.
I love that. And increasing serendipity might be something that I will steal, because that is a wonderful little tagline. Okay, so one question for me is, engineering background, chief of staff. What was it like becoming a founder? What was it like kind of stepping out of that corporate process and saying, okay, I'm my own boss, and it's time to make this thing go?
It was and is really hard. I think in Silicon Valley, people don't really talk about the psychology of founding a company or starting something. Everyone's always crushing it.
Always.
Always.
Hashtag.
Right. And there were a lot of moments in the early days, and still always ongoing, a lot of moments where I'm like, am I the right person? Am I making the right decisions? Like, have I built something that people really, really care about? Even when there's clear evidence that things are going really well and everything, there's always a lot of doubt.
Sure.
But aside from that, like, I think there was no better training ground for me than DropBox and seeing all the executive meetings happening to learn about, okay, here are all the functions of a business and like how you should build them up and how you need to set them up for success. So that's helpful.
Absolutely. And so I know, Sourceress, and one of the, I guess, topics of conversation that has been very prevalent during this summit has been diversity. When did that become an area of focus for your own company? And was that kind of born initially through some of those executive meetings at DropBox, or was that founded later, kind of after you had founded the company?
That's a great question. So the interest in diversity was born at DropBox. I actually, at some point, I forgot what the initiative was called, but we had a big diversity initiative at DropBox because we had a huge problem, especially with women and underrepresented minorities. And this was in early, 2013 or so. And things have gotten way better because of a lot of the initiatives that we had launched at DropBox. And so, at DropBox, I worked on improving interview processes to remove bias, surveys around the company to figure out how to systematically address bias and detect it, how to source and kind of fill the funnel with diverse candidates. So across the board, and I'm happy to dive more into that. And so that's where the interest in diversity began. And then as we were founding Sourceress, I was like, as someone who's starting this company, it feels like my responsibility to really care about bias and diversity. We're building machine learning models and they work, and what they do is they find candidates who are a good fit. They surface candidates who are a good fit. And they do it really well. And the problem with that is that if the model is biased, then they will systematically not surface particular types of people. And I kind of feel like this moral responsibility to care about diversity because of that. And so it's been, as a result, like a big part of the conversation as we're building the product. And then it's also something that we see among all of our clients a lot. Our clients care a lot about diversity, and it's a huge struggle. It's really hard to hire diverse, especially engineers. Sourceress does a lot with engineering hiring. So hiring diverse engineers has been really tough for all of our clients. And so I actually go meet with clients very frequently and talk to them about here's how you improve your interview process and et cetera.
Okay. So since we can dive into that, thank you for that. I am one of your make-believe clients right now. I'm whatever company. And I'm looking to become more diverse and inclusive in my interview process. How do I go about doing that?
Yeah, good question. So I would break diversity into 3 pieces. There's the sourcing piece. There's the interview process, so getting them kind of through the door and giving them that first experience. And then there's retention. So let's start with the interview process, because this is where I see a lot of issues. In the interview process, what we have found over and over and over again is that diverse candidates, candidates who face any type of stereotype threat, tend to behave differently in the interview process. So they feel less comfortable, they're less confident, they're not as excited to move forward, they have more doubt about their performance. And so there are a bunch of things that you can do in your interview process to help more diverse candidates and people who experience stereotype threat make it through the process. What we saw at DropBox was that diverse candidates would drop out of the interview process at much higher rates than non-diverse candidates. They would drop out both withdrawing, so deciding themselves, like, okay, I'm not a good candidate, and also be rejected. And we had some ideas for why that might be. One is that if a candidate experiences stereotype threat, then they might feel like, oh, okay, I didn't do that well, and so I'm just going to withdraw my candidacy. Like, I'm not going to be a good fit here. Or they might feel like, oh, the team, as I was doing the interview, it didn't feel that good. I don't know if I'll be accepted on this team. I don't know if I'll perform well here. And so there are a lot of reasons why they are more likely to withdraw. And so some things that you can do very actionably are, we found that, and I find across our clients, that if you get back to candidates within especially diverse candidates, very quickly, so within 24 hours or 48 hours of their interview, with kind of the next step and how excited you are, that really helps. So if you wait 3 days or longer, that people are much more likely to kind of like brew and stew in their head. And also, if you have someone of the same background do the initial phone call, that also helps.
Yeah.
So if you're interviewing a woman, have a woman do the initial screen. It's surprising, but it does happen.
Sure.
It does help. And then there's a big piece around building interview scorecards. So a lot of what I see happen in interviews, and I'm sure, as the audience, you see a lot of this too, is people will do an interview, they'll fill out a scorecard, and at the end they're like, I'm not sure how I feel about this person.
Yep.
Or I'm
it's
not
that gut thing.
It's that gut thing.
Ugh.
Right. And it's totally normal. It's very human. And it does make it really hard to hire diverse people. And so I have a strategy to counteract this that I call seeking evidence. So in our interview scorecards and in, this is what I tell all of our clients, and what they do typically is they, in our scorecards, we have kind of the, attribute you're looking for.
Yep.
So does this person X? Does this person, wear hats on Saturdays? Does this person seem like the kind of person who'd be a culture fit? And you would write out, here are XYZ things that I'm looking for. So I'm looking for this, this, and this. And as the interviewer, what you need to do is not only score and write your notes, you don't even have to write your notes. What you're trying to do in that interview is look for evidence that the person is a culture fit, or look for evidence that the person is capable of doing this technical problem, or look for evidence that the person is able to architect or project manage or whatever. And so the interviewer's job is to look for evidence. And then on the scorecard, what they should do is write down what is the evidence you have that this person is capable of this thing. Or, sometimes you have clear evidence that the person is not capable of this thing. But you have to write down the evidence. It has to be very concrete.
Sure.
And if you don't have enough evidence for a particular thing, then you tell the next interviewer, hey, I didn't get evidence for this. Can you try to get evidence for this? And this really helps remove a lot of that gut feel. Because once you start getting to concrete examples, concrete evidence, that's where it becomes a lot easier to say, oh, yeah, this person, yes, they do. There is clear evidence that they're capable of all these things. Or, oh, there's clear evidence that they're not capable of all these things. And it's much less of like, I feel this, I feel that.
Yeah, I feel like there's almost a misconception, especially in interviewing when you have multiple different interviews where it's like, oh, you can't talk between those. Like if you have someone come in and it's like, no, like that should inform the next step of the conversation.
What you're trying to do is learn about the person and learn the evidence behind whether or not they can do this job. So.
Yeah. So that addresses the idea of interviewing and diversity as it pertains to once you actually have that conversation.
Removing bias in interviewing.
Exactly. Which has been a large topic of conversation at the summit. But you also mentioned that sourcing has a huge role to play in diversity. So what are some best practices then when it comes to sourcing and keeping diversity in mind on that side?
Yeah. So this part is harder. I did a bunch of sourcing at DropBox, and it's really hard to be less biased as a sourcer. Sometimes you just have this gut feel of like, oh, I'm not sure if this person would be a culture fit or this kind of fit. And there's actually a really interesting experiment we ran at Sourceress. So on the Sourceress backend, we actually combine human and machine intelligence. And we actually have humans kind of like look at profiles and do quality control on what the machine produces. And we ran an experiment where we put the name and picture of the person at the bottom. And so you had to look through the whole profile and like make a decision, and then finally you got to see the name and picture. And it was super interesting. When I frequently, actually, when I was like doing test quality control, I found myself scrolling through the profile, making the call, and I would get to the bottom, and this is like an engineering profile.
Sure.
I'd get to the bottom, and I would feel surprised that the person was a woman. And I was like, holy shit, I am super biased.
Yeah.
And like, had I seen that at the top, like, what would I have thought of this person? And it being a woman, that like makes me really nervous.
It's like, wait, what?
Right. But in the sourcing process, what I typically recommend to people and what I try to do, what we try to do at Sourceress is, try to anonymize as much as we can.
Yep.
And then also, on the flip side, actually systematically sourcing diverse candidates. So trying to basically find, X diverse candidates for every Y candidates that we find. And that just kind of helps, bring at least more diversity into the top of the funnel so that the hiring managers and the interviewers are at least interacting with a more diverse set of people. And that helps a lot.
Beautiful.
Yeah. One thing also at DropBox, on the executive team that we did was we asked our agencies to bring us, we said we would not interview until our agencies brought us, X% diverse candidates.
Yeah.
And that also helped a lot. We ended up hiring 3 female VPs.
Wonderful.
After that. And we had not hired any female VPs before that. So
I like it. Okay.
yeah. So the pipeline built by sourcing makes a big difference.
Yeah, I totally understand. And I mean, again, I think the corollary, like for sales, it's like what you start with is the foundation of what you're going to end
Exactly.
with. It's like you have to focus on that.
Exactly.
Right? Okay, very cool. So obviously this entire summit is focused around recruiting automation. And so what does that really mean to you at Sourceress as a CEO, as someone that had to do sourcing and hiring in the past? What is recruiting automation and why should we care about it?
It's a good question. I actually think I kind of liken it to the early days of the internet when we had Yahoo with its directories and Google with its PageRank and how Google improved search a lot. I don't think many parts of recruiting can be automated. I think there is truly a human-to-human connection that needs to happen, and that's really important.
Yeah.
And so, when we're building Sourceress, I never say we're replacing recruiters, we're replacing, sourcers. But I do think that there's a much more powerful system that can help you find, in the early internet age, it was a system that could help you find the information you needed to find on the internet. And for this, it's about a system that helps you find and engage and get interested the right people at the right time, much more powerfully. As an individual recruiter, it's hard to know, is someone looking? What are the signals? How do I know? The way I think about it at Sourceress is our job is to figure out who is likely to be someone who you would be really who would amplify your team's creative efforts, and who is likely to be excited right now.
Yeah.
And how do we pitch what you have to offer to that candidate in a way that really resonates with their interests and what they might be excited about? The way I think about automation is it's really about empowerment. And I think a lot of people say AI is going to take all of our jobs. I don't think so. I think AI is going to take the boring parts of your job, the boring parts of my job when I was doing sourcing, and just make me way more powerful.
Yeah.
And what I want to do is talk to candidates who would be potentially great fits, and not necessarily, learn all of these little, Boolean search strings and things like that I have to do in order to figure out the right people. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about empowerment.
Exactly.
I agree. Awesome. Well, Kanjun, that was a really fun conversation. If anyone has any other information or questions or curious about Sourceress, definitely check them out. And I hope you have a great rest of your time at the Recruiting Automation Summit.
Thank you very much.
Of course. All right. Until next time, Kanjun.
All right. Talk to you soon.